And we're going to be starting on page 217 in the old books, and I think it's about 257 in the new books. Is that correct? 257 in the new books? No one? All right, we'll go with that then. So we're starting in the middle of the page on page 217, and it's the heading is the very first Omar offering. Okay, the very first Omar offering. And as we're reading tonight, remember what Yahweh said to Moshe. Okay, remember what he said to Moshe. He said, be sure to do all things according to what? All things according to the pattern which I've shown you, right? Do all things according to the pattern that I've shown you. And remember that pattern is also, it's a pattern in the shadow of the heavenly things, right? It's just a pattern of it. And so just to get our understanding going here, just to picture these things, remember when you look at your own shadow, how much of the details concerning you can you tell from your shadow? Very little, right? Very little. But when you look in the mirror, then you can see all of the details, right? The color of your eyes, the color of your hair, you know, facial features and all of these things. So keep that in mind, because as we're going over the word of Yahweh here, you know, this is a pattern that was shown to Moshe that he was to give to the children of Israel, but it's a greater understanding to all of these things which Yahweh is giving to us in these last days. So here, the very first Omar offering, Leviticus 23 verse 10, gives us Yahweh's instructions to Moshe, which he was to give to the children of Israel about the first Omar offering when they entered the land. When you have come into the land which I give you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priests. First, the children of Israel had to reap, that is, harvest the grain in order to eat grain, because they were still eating manna until a specified time. So remember, they were eating manna for 40 years in the wilderness, and then Yahweh were giving them instructions so that they can actually start eating grain again here pretty soon. So it says that in the book of Yeshua, or Joshua, in the King James, but in Yeshua 4 verse 19, we find that the Israelites crossed over the river Jordan into Canaan on the 10th day of the first moon, Abib, and encamped at Gilgal. At the Gilgal encampment, Yeshua, son of Nun, circumcised all of the males who had definitely not been circumcised during the wilderness wandering, as it says in Yeshua chapter 5 verses 2 through 9. On the 14th day of the first moon, between 3 o'clock and sunset, the children of Israel killed the Passover lambs, the Passover sacrifice. In Yeshua chapter 5 verse 10 in the King James Version, and the children of Israel encamped at Gilgal and kept sacrificed the Passover on the 14th day of the moon at even between the two evenings in the plains of Jericho. Now again, just pay attention to how, precise, how specific Yahweh is concerning when to do certain things, okay? And keep in mind the great plan of Yahweh, because, a lot of this, when you read this, it says on the preparation day before certain things took place, okay? Because there's a preparation that needs to be done, especially with the people of Yahweh. There's a preparation that needs to be done before we're offered to Yahweh, before we're ready to be used by Yahweh. Okay, so keep those things in mind. That afternoon, the children of Israel sacrificed the Passover lambs. That following night, the children of Israel ate grain for the first time in 40 years. They ate unleavened bread with the Passover lamb and bitter herbs. Yeshua chapter 5 verse 11. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self same day. The children of Israel were following Yahweh's exact ordinances and were effectively making this feast Yahweh's feast. Okay, so again, if you're not doing it exactly the way that Yahweh says to do things, then it's not a feast of Yahweh, it's a feast of men. The Israelites selected their sacrificial lambs on the very day that they encamped in Gilgal, pinning them up on the 10th day of this first moon. On the preparation day, on the 14th day of this first moon, these Passover lambs were sacrificed between 3 o'clock and sunset. And here you see the diagram here where it talks about the preparation day. And you can see underneath that it says that the 13th at even through the 14th at even is the preparation day. And you see that section there with the square around it. Okay, and of course the black spots or the dark squares represents the night, and the lighter spots represent the day. So you can see how that time period right there on the 14th day is the preparation day when certain things were done. And it shows the time period on the next one where the lambs were killed. Okay, and that shows you right there between the 3 o'clock and the sunset time period, that between the two evenings. Then the last one here says that the lamb eaten at the Passover meal. Okay, and you see that that's clearly after the sun has gone down there on this chart here. So after these sacrificial lambs were killed, then these lambs were roasted and then eaten with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs that very night. At the Passover meal, the very first meal of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, on the 15th day of the new moon of green ears of barley. The phrase "morrow after the Passover" in Yeshua 5:11 should have been translated "on the day after the Passover sacrificial offering." The day after the Passover sacrificial offering is the 15th day, the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And here you see that chart at the bottom, the lamb killed. It shows again between 3 o'clock to sunset, between the 14th and the 15th day there. And then it shows the morrow after the Passover, the morrow after the Passover sacrifice. And you can see it right there. And you know, it may seem complicated reading it, but this is what we've been doing for years, right? So if you're having a hard time like following it in the book, just think about how we actually do these things. Okay, so when we have Seder, okay, that's after the sunset. Do we ever start, before sunset? We never start before sunset, right? Because this is Yahweh's ordinance. He says this is when you start, after the sunset, okay? If we start before that, we'd be doing things on the preparation day, which wouldn't be according to Yahweh's laws. So, keep these things in mind, and if it does seem a little complicated, get with your priest. Continuing on here on the top of page 219, it says, the Talmud, Moed, Volume 4, Rosh Hashanah, page 47 tells us, whence did the Israelites bring the Omar, which they offered on their entry into the land of Israel? If you say it grew while still in the possession of the heathen, this cannot be, since the All-Merciful prescribed your heart and not the harvest of the stranger. But how do we know that they, the Israelites, offered it at all? Perhaps they did not offer it at all. Do not imagine such a thing, for it is written, all they did eat of the produce of the land on the morrow after the Passover. On the morrow after the Passover they ate, but not before, which shows that they brought the Omar and only then ate. Okay, so remember, Pastor's still showing how to count to Pentecost and getting things lined up because of the confusion that's in the world trying to count. Because remember, you have the way that the Pharisees counted, which Yeshua agreed with, and the ways that the Sadducees counted, which, Pastor's showing how if you use the scriptures and believe what's written, how that's wrong. And all of our knowledge and information comes from the things that are written in the scriptures, okay? Not just, other people's understanding. Pastor just doesn't come out here and tell us what he thinks is right. He gives us what's written in the law, right? He doesn't lean on his own understanding. He's inspired to teach us exactly what we need to know. Praise Yahweh. So continuing on here, it says the children of Israel most definitely ate unleavened bread with the roasted sacrificial Passover lamb and bitter herbs. Definitely also the Omar had to have been reaped before the children of Israel could have eaten any bread of any kind at all, because Yahweh's ordinance also emphatically states in Leviticus 23 verse 15, and you shall eat neither bread nor parched corns nor green ears until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your father. It shall be a statute, an ordinance forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. So he's saying you can't do this until a certain time. Very specific. Up until the time they had eaten of the produce of the land of Canaan, the children of Israel had been eating manna. The manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the produce of the land. And they had eaten unleavened bread on the 15th day, immediately after sunset, the 14th day, which began the 15th day. In Yeshua 5 verse 12 in the King James Version, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. And so again, remember we started off the class talking about the what the instructions were to Moshe. Okay, do all things according to the pattern. And remember that these things are a shadow of the heavenly things, right? So as we're reading, I'm looking at this word manna. And what did Yeshua say concerning manna? But I don't know, Kahan. He says, I am the true manna from heaven, right? I'm the true manna from heaven. And so again, if we're thinking about all of these different words and really look at the lessons that Yahweh is showing us, we can see how Yahweh is preparing us for a great work, right? I mean, it shouldn't be a secret to us what Yahweh is preparing us for. But, a lot of these things are in the details. And so we're doing things and, in Yahweh's house and preparing for things. And most of it, we don't even know what we're preparing for. Okay. We have to believe in Yahweh, knowing that the work that he's doing in us, that is going to be right. That everything that we're doing in Yahweh's house is right. Trusting in that and getting these things done. We're not going to have complete understanding right now. Okay. But this is where our trust in Yahweh comes in at. And so all of these words are very, very, very important. Everything that Yahweh has is very important. All of the offerings, all of the sacrifices, all of these things. Okay. And the more we study these things out, the more we'll understand. Okay. Because remember, when you're educated, you can make better choices. Okay. But again, you're not going to have complete understanding right now. So this is where you have to believe into the one sent. Right. If he tells you to get certain things out of your life, guess what? You don't have to do that. Exactly. What? No. You need to do everything you can to get certain things out of your life, or else these are just words, in a book, words on paper. Okay? It won't benefit any of us if we don't actually follow the teachings. So continuing on here, the word old, as in old corn, is not in the original writings. The word old has been added by the English translators and has served only to add to the confusion about this time period. The New International Version, Hebrew English Old Testament by John R. Kohlenberger III, Zondervan anyway, let's go on here. But it says in Yeshua 5 verse 12, let's see, I can't even see that. Well, he'll explain it here. So on the top of page 530, as it shows that the word translated old corn is one Hebrew word, abur. Word number 5669 in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, and means kept over. However, in Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon of the Old Testament, Tregelles Baker Bookhouse, Grand Rapids, Michigan, page 660, gives us the correct meaning of this word. And it means produce, offering of the land. What is that? Passive sense of the conjunction. Let's see. To bring produce from. So in each of the places, this Hebrew word abur, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is translated old corn. It should have been translated as offering of the land or produce. With this understanding in mind, as well as the understanding that the Passover lambs were sacrificed on the 14th day of the first moon, Yeshua 5 verses 10 through 12 correctly translated in the book of Yahweh says, So the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and sacrificed the Passover on the 14th day of the first moon at evening on the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the offering of the land on the morrow after the Passover lamb was sacrificed, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. The manna ceased from that when they ate from the land's produce. There was no more manna for the children of Israel. They ate from the crops of the land of Canaan that year. Reaping the Omer offering. In Leviticus 23, verses 9 and 10, in the King James Version, we read about Yahweh's ordinances of reaping the Omer offering. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you come into the land which I give you, you shall reap the harvest thereof. Then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. First, we must understand that this reaping is most definitely not speaking of a time when each head of household would go to his own field, cut down his own grain, and make sure he brought a sheaf that he make sure he brought a sheaf that he had to cut to the priest. Even in the tiny land of Israel, the southern fields of the Jericho Valley are ready to harvest well before the northern fields. This reaping of the Omer offering sheaf of first fruits was a special ceremony performed by a select group of individuals who performed the cutting of the Omer on behalf of all the people of Israel. This sheaf most assuredly was not brought by each and every man in Israel. Another fact you must clearly understand is the fact that the reaping of the Omer offering is entirely different from the waving of the Omer offering. The reaping ceremony was even performed on a different day than the waving ceremony. So there's a few things going on here, okay, men? So Pastor just clearly wrote here and showed us that the reaping is different than the waving. They're performed at two different time periods. The day the Omer was reaped. In Leviticus 23:15, we read, And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. From this scripture, we know that the Omer was brought to the priest on a Sabbath, because the count of Pentecost would begin on the day after this Sabbath. Now you can see how that scripture is important when it's coming to, when it comes to counting to the Pentecost, right? Because we covered last week how the Sadducees started their count like after the weekly Sabbath, right? Which means that the Pentecost will fall on the first day all the time, which doesn't line up with the ordinances and the statutes of Yahweh. Okay, so keep that in mind. So continuing on here, it says, let's see. From this scripture, we all know that the Omer was brought to the priest on a Sabbath because the count to Pentecost would begin on the day after this Sabbath. The word translated brought in this scripture is word number 935 in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary and has the meaning of cause to enter into. Young man, that's a little men, get your brother. Shh, pay attention, okay? It says here, what we must also understand here is the fact that Yahweh calls his holy feast days convocations, Sabbath days. Yahweh commands that the first holy day and the last holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread be holy convocations. Leviticus 23, verses 6 through 8. Then, in Leviticus 23, verse 39 in the King James Version, Yahweh emphatically calls these holy convocations of his Sabbath days. Also in the 15th day of the 7th moon, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto Yahweh 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. The holy convocation days of Yahweh's ordained feast are Sabbath days of rest. However, Yahweh's Omer was reaped on the Sabbath. Your question may now be, if you have not yet accepted the plain truth about Yahweh's way of counting to the Pentecost practiced by the Pharisees, what Sabbath? Okay, so if you haven't fully accepted the way that the Pharisees started to count, then the question is like, well, then what Sabbath? Okay, what would be the correct Sabbath day? Yahweh has given us another ordinance, another clue, if you will, about what Sabbath. He was speaking of, saying in Deuteronomy 15, verse 9, 7 weeks shall you number unto yourself. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such a time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the grain. So you see how Yahweh is detailed. He eliminates all of the confusion if you believe what's written. Okay, believing what's written. And what else do you need? A teacher. You need the one sent by Yahweh, okay? The one sent by Yahweh. He's very specific about that too, because men heap to themselves teachers that tickle their ears and don't bring forth the word of Yahweh. So you have to believe into the one sent. So the word translated beginnest in the previous scripture is word number 2490 in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, halal. In this context, the word halal means to begin as if by an opening wedge. The opening wedge was the reaping, the cutting of the Omer on the Sabbath, on the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Sunsino Talmud, Kodashim, Volume 1, Menahoth, pages 383 and 384, tells us the procedure, the delegation from the Beth Din used to reap the Omer. Mishnah. What was the procedure? The messengers of the Beth Din used to go out on the day, on the day before the festival and tie the unreaped corn in bunches to make it, easier to reap. All the inhabitants of the towns nearby assembled there so that it might be reaped with much display. As soon as it could be dark, he called out, "Has the sun set?" And they answered, "Yes." "Has the sun set?" And they answered, "Yes." "With this sickle?" And they answered, "Yes." "Into this basket?" And they answered, "Yes." "Into this basket?" And they answered, "Yes." "On this Sabbath?" He called out further, "On this Sabbath?" And they answered, "Yes." "On this Sabbath?" And they answered, "Yes." "Shall I reap?" And they answered, "Reap." "Shall I reap?" And they answered, "Reap." He repeated every matter 3 times, and they answered, "Yes, yes, yes." As I said previously, there is a very great difference in the reaping of the Omer and the waving of the same. The following diagram shows when the sickle was first put to the standing sheaves of barley and when the flour obtained from these sheaves was offered on the altar. And so again, you can see at the bottom of the page there, the dark square is representing sunset and the light square is representing the day, or night and day. And it shows you where the Omer was reaped at the sunset there. And then the Omer prepared the sunset on the 16th day and then offered during the daytime on the 16th. Okay, so again, those charts there make it really easy to get a picture of when things were done. So at the top of the page here, it says, when the delegation from the Beth Din performed this ceremony, the sickle was officially put to the standing grain, Deuteronomy 16:9. These selected men were standing by the side of those sheaves, which had already been tied together for this very important ceremony, very late in the afternoon on the 14th day, the preparation day. Then, just after the sun had set in the western horizon, which began the 15th day, the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a Sabbath, these selected men asked the bystanders the following questions 3 times. Has the sun gone down into this basket? On this Sabbath shall I reap? So you can see one of the things that I'm seeing from there is that everyone had to be in unity. Okay, everyone had to be in agreement with what was going on at that particular time. Okay, everyone had to be in unity. And if you weren't in unity, you would have stood out. Has the sun set? No! Okay, go get some priests to talk to this guy. Okay, why is he going against, the truth here? The sun is clearly gone, right? So everyone had to be in unity, the same mindset, and learning and performing the things that Yahweh says to perform. And again, man, the meanings behind these things are so beautiful. And you're going to be amazed that when these things are truly revealed. Continuing on here, it says, only after they received an affirmative answer 3 times did they cut the Omer sheaves. Please note, the cutting of the Omer was on the Sabbath. If the Omer had been cut at any other time, it definitely would not have been cut on the Sabbath. This ceremony was performed during during the time Yeshua Messiah was alive to begin the sickle to the grain. This ceremony reaped the Omer and marked the Sabbath that began the count to Pentecost. This ceremony of cutting the first sheaves of barley also marked the beginning of Yahweh's sacred year on the Sabbath, as we saw on page 87 of this book. The Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, volume 4, on page 923, shows us again the oldest calendar, aptly termed the Pentecontad calendar, and employed by Israel uninterruptedly until the time of Solomon, was of distinctly agricultural character, in that it reckoned time primarily by the state of the annual crop. The day of cutting the first sheaf of the new crop constituted its new year. And see, new year. The New Year's Day of Yahweh's sacred year is the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a Sabbath. Yahweh's sacred year begins on the first holy day of the Passover Feast of Unleavened Bread, a Sabbath, and ends on the last great day of his sacred year, a Sabbath, at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. So Yahweh begins and ends his year with what? What's the word specifically, though? A Sabbath, right. He begins and ends it on a Sabbath. But yes, it's during the feast, but it begins and ends with the Sabbath day, a holy convocation. Okay, a holy convocation. Yeshua Messiah, our high priest over the house of Yahweh, agreed with and accepted this way. Yeshua Messiah voiced no objection to the way that the Pharisees began the count to Pentecost. The temple, its ministries and service by Dr. Alfred Edersheim on page 258 then tells us the relatively small amount of barley that was reaped on this Sabbath day in a very short time. Just as the sun went down, 3 men, each with a sickle and basket, formally set to work, but in order clearly to bring out all that was distinctive in the ceremony, they first asked of the bystanders 3 times each of these questions. Has the sun gone down with this sickle into this basket on this Sabbath, or first Passover day? And lastly, shall I reap? Having each time been answered in the affirmative, they cut down the barley to the amount of 1 ephah, or 10 omers, or 3 seahs, which is equal to about 3 pecks, or 3 pints of our English measure. Okay, so again, you have to know. This is why Pastor said we have to have the whole book of Yahweh in our head. Okay, and not just the book of Yahweh, but the understanding from the teachings that he's bringing out and that we're learning here at Yahweh's house. Because again, I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again, because I really need to. I'm trying to drive it home that Yahweh just doesn't do things for no reason. Okay, 3 men aren't just cutting down grain just to be doing something. They have a meaning. Okay, and again, we talked about it last week with the harvesting. Yeshua says, I was send the harvesters. My Malach came to harvest, to gather in, to perform this work. Okay, so all of these things, start, thinking about all of these things and start, rejoicing in the wonderful things that Yahweh is showing us, because sometimes we forget Yahweh, and that's why, the days seem long and hard. Okay, the days seem long. You know what? I have to read this scripture to you. I have to read this scripture to you. It's in, where is it at, man? It's in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Okay, so when we forget Yahweh, we fall into this category here. So actually, this is chapter 6. Okay, now and it's not just talking about financial blessings and things like that. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, starting in verse 1, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun. It is common among men. A man to whom Yahweh has given riches, wealth, and honor, so that he lacks nothing that anyone could desire, but whom Yahweh has not given the power to enjoy it. A stranger devours it instead. This is vanity, meaningless, and grievous affliction. Okay, so a person can have certain things, but doesn't know how to enjoy what Yahweh has given them. Okay, and again, it's not just financial, because Yahweh has given us what to rejoice about in these last days. His work, right? He's given us his work to rejoice in, right? But if we don't know how to enjoy his work and what he called us to his house, then what little we have will be given to another. Or it'll be taken from us and nobody receive it. We'll be devoured by the adversary and her tactics. But look at chapter 5 here, verses 19 and 20. Here's the opposite of that. Furthermore, every man to whom Yahweh gives riches and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his circumstances, and to be joyful in his work, this is a gift from Yahweh. He will not think about the shortness of his life, for Yahweh keeps him occupied with the joy in his heart. Okay, man? So you see that? Okay, so when you forget Yahweh, you end up, not knowing how to enjoy being in Yahweh's house. Okay? And there's a lot of people who don't know how to enjoy, or who haven't known how to enjoy being in Yahweh's house, and they're gone. Okay, do you know how rich we are in Yahweh? I mean, you have to understand this. You have to understand how rich we are in Yahweh and rejoice in these things all the time. If you forget Yahweh, man, you're going to fail. Praise Yahweh. Never forget your heavenly Father. And like it says here, you will learn how to enjoy what he has given you and not worry about these other things, but enjoy your life, man. Being joyful in the work that he has given you. Man, that's a tough lesson to learn, but when you learn it, joyful are you, man. I'm telling you. Let's see here. Page 224 in the old book here. Where am I at? Let's see, for those who... Okay, so right about in the middle here it says, closer towards the top, it says, for those who insist upon following the Council of Nicaea, or the Sadducean aristocracy, insisting that this Sabbath is the weekly seventh-day Sabbath, there is a scripture which will stop all arguments. This scripture is a statute or ordinance forever throughout all generations and all dwellings, which says in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 14. You see, forever throughout all your generations. Okay, never coming to an end. And you shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your father. It shall be a statute for forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. This scripture definitely says that until this offering is brought or caused to enter in, no one at all was to even eat bread, parched corn, or green ears. However, Leviticus chapter 23, verse 6 in the King James Version has emphatically commanded us to eat unleavened bread for the entire duration of the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. And it says that 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Yet Leviticus 23:14 has also commanded that we cannot eat bread, parched corn, or green ears until this offering has been caused to enter in. Now, if we cannot eat unleavened bread until this offering is reaped or caused to enter in, and if we were to wait until the weekly Sabbath, before the weekly Sabbath came, before we cut down this offering, 7 days could go by before we could lawfully eat unleavened bread. Example, in 1983, the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread fell on the 4th day of the week, which is a Roman Wednesday. If we had followed the Council of Nicaea or the Sadducean party, waiting until the weekly Sabbath in order to reap this Omer offering, we would have waited from the 4th day of the 7th day, from the 4th day to the 7th day before we could lawfully eat any unleavened bread, parched grain, or green ears at all, because Yahweh's ordinance state that one cannot eat bread until this offering is brought, caused to enter in to the priest. So another proof is brought forth that the Sabbath spoken of was not the weekly Sabbath. It assuredly was the first holy day Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which the count to Pentecost began from. So remember, this Passover started after the Sabbath at sunset, right, going into the first day of the week. So if we would have went by that count, then we wouldn't have had, we wouldn't be able to eat anything until the following Sabbath, thus breaking Yahweh's law. Okay, so this year, the feast started at sunset after the Sabbath. So you can see how, how it's definitely important to know how to count Yahweh's way, how to look at things the way that Yahweh does, so that we can be in unity with that. Okay, we can't have different teachings. We can't. Yeshua said that our righteousness have to exceed theirs. Okay, the scribes and the Pharisees, all of those guys, because again, even with the Pharisees, they still had a mixture. Even though they got the count right, there were still other things that they were doing wrong. But the Sadducees, they had this wrong along with other things. But there was no unity, with those leaders there. Okay, not so in Yahweh's house. Yahweh's bringing forth, leadership that's in unity, teaching others, how to be in unity with that leadership, so that we can learn how to guide and teach everyone else, right? Because with this unity, we're going to have the same problems that we have today. So again, it all falls back to one of the very first teachings in the Yahweh's house, which is what? Keeping the Sabbath day holy. This is how Yahweh starts the year. This is how Yahweh ends the year. Keeping the Sabbath. Meeting with Yahweh so that we can learn. Life is all a lesson, man. Everything that Yahweh didn't just give us life to go on vacation. Where the pastor said, that's an empty spot in your life, right? We should be learning all of the time. Okay, so continuing on here on page 225, waiving the Omer offering. We have already proven the sheaf or Omer of the first fruits was to be reaped or cut on the first holy day Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This same sheaf or Omer that was brought, caused to enter in on the Sabbath, was then offered or waived the day after the Sabbath. Leviticus 23:11. And the priest shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Okay, so has anyone ever looked up that word wave? Okay, it has a lot of different meanings. One of the definitions in that word wave is to be sprinkled. Okay, another meaning is to send. Okay, so think about that. The grain was cut down, gathered, turned into fine flour, offered up to Yahweh, right? Wave, sprinkled, sent. Okay, you see how all of these words, the understanding of these words, give you a picture of what's being done. Remember, the grain represents mankind. Okay, being turned into fine flour, or the having the best quality from this product, because the grain is rough, the wheat is rough, but then it's sifted. All of the rough stuff is taken out of it to the point where it's excellent in quality, excellent in character, and then Yahweh can use that. Who here would like to just take a handful of wheat and just put like some cold cuts and some ketchup on that and just eat that as a sandwich? Put that in the oven and then put some icing on it when it's done, just raw wheat. Oh, you turn that stuff into flour, right? Then you can use it for a lot of different things, right? Can you just imagine just eating some wheat? I don't care how much salt you put on that. It's not going to be tasty, but when you break that down, then it can be used for so many different things. And that's what Yahweh's doing with us. We're rough right now. Okay, but when he get this roughness out of us, the sin, when he gets this out of us and get us, pure and perfect and holy, he'll be able to use us for any and everything. Okay, that's some of the things that he shows us in these offerings. Okay, getting this rough exterior, the sin out of our lives, and getting to the core, the righteousness that's in us, bringing forth this righteous character. Then, men, you will be able to go anywhere and represent Yahweh in any and everything that you do. Okay, but you first have to become like Yahweh. Continuing on here, it says that the Omer was reaped after the sunset of the 14th day, beginning the 15th day, on the first holy day Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The cut barley sheaves were then brought to the priest, as Leviticus 23:10 gave instruction. The priest then accepted this Omer offering from that delegation, thus making it lawful to eat bread during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, eat unleavened bread during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They placed the cut sheaves in a safe place until that Sabbath came to an end. The first holy day Sabbath of the 15th day of the first moon came to its end at sunset, which begins the 16th day. Right at that sunset, beginning that 16th day, those cut sheaves were brought into the temple court, where much work preparing these sheaves was begun. The temple, its ministry and services, by Edersheim, pages 258 and 259, tells us that the ears were brought into the court of the temple and thrashed, cut with canes or stalks so as not to injure the corn, then parched on a pan, perforated with holes so that each grain might be torched by the fire, and finally exposed to the wind. The corn was prepared. Excuse me. The corn thus prepared was ground into a barley mill, which left the hulls whole. According to some, the flour was always successfully passed through 13 sieves. How do you pronounce? Is that sieves or sifts? Sifts. Each closer than the other. Okay, so you see, like, it's 13 sifts. So at first, to have like larger holes, then they shake it, then they, progressively go down, and then the holes will get smaller, thus removing the larger clumps. Okay, and so again, looking at that 13 sifts, the first thing that pop in your mind should be what? 13 what? 13 attributes of Yahweh, right? Because again, we're seeing how we're becoming like Yahweh and what it takes to become like Yahweh. So the sifting of this flour, removing like the chunks, whatever don't fit through those holes, doesn't belong. Yahweh can't use that. Removing all of those blemishes or all of those things, that's not excellent in quality. Okay? Not excellent in quality. So continuing on here, says this statement of a rival authority, however, seems more rational, that it was only done till the flour was successfully or sufficiently fine, which was, in the kingdom, I'm not going to have this problem, man. Be able to see this stuff. Okay, so let's see here. However, seems more rational that it was only done till the flour was sufficiently fine, which was ascertained by one of the Gitzbarim, or treasurers, plunging his hands into it. The sifting procedures, or the sifting process, being continued so long as any of the flour adhered to the hands. Though 1 ephah, or 10 omers of barley, was cut down, only 1 omer of flour, about 5.1 pints of our measurements, was offered in the temple on the 2nd Paschal, or 16th day of Nisan. The rest of the flour might be redeemed and used for any purpose. The omer of the flour was mixed with a log, or very nearly 3/4 of a pint of oil, and a handful of frankincense put upon it, and it was waved before Yahweh, and a handful taken out of it burned on the altar. The remainder belonged to the priest. This was what is popularly thought, not very correctly called, the presentation of the first of the wave sheaf on the 2nd day of the Passover feast, or the 16th of Nisan. So when you look at that whole procedure there, they gathered the grain, the wheat, they thrashed it, they beat it up, they sifted it, they parched it, it was exposed to fire and wind. Then after all of those things took place, this was the holy portion of Yahweh. Okay? And then the rest of it was used for other reasons. Some burnt on the altars, some was redeemed by the priest, and it was just used for different things. But like if I was flour, I'd be seeking after being a portion that was lifted up by the priest to Yahweh. Okay? That's where you want to be at, man. You want to be that portion that the priest can offer up to Yahweh. Okay? You don't want to be, even though the rest of the flour is still holy to Yahweh, we have that opportunity to be, the best, to have the best opportunity, or the best jobs in the kingdom of Yahweh. So we need to strive so that the priest can offer us up to Yahweh and to be used by Yahweh. Okay? So many are called, but what? Few are chosen. And think about how much wheat is gathered. We just read how much wheat is gathered, but how much? Out of all of that wheat, only a handful, man. Okay? Even after being sifted, even after going through the other process, still only a few were chosen. Okay? That's how serious it is. Pastor said that this is serious business. Although 10 omers, or approximately 3 pecks and 3 pints, English measure, was reaped, only 1 omer of flour, about 5.1 pints, was waved on the morning of the 16th day of the first moon. And only a handful of this flour mixed with the oil and frankincense was burned on the altar. The cut sheaves were not waved. The prepared flour from these sheaves was waved. This flour was waved on the morrow after the first holy day Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Counting to Pentecost. Because again, remember, the whole count of Pentecost, there's, the grain was gathered, and, and everything else was just, it was a preparation. You were counting in order to present something to Yahweh. Okay, counting in order to present something to Yahweh. Keep that in mind. Okay, so Yahweh willing, from now on, the whole count of Pentecost is not just trying to remember, what day of the Omer is it? Okay, it's much more detailed than that. But why does Yahweh make us count that? Okay, think about that, because it's very important to understand what's going on in that time period. Again, it's not just, so we can count 50 days. There's very specific things that's taking place. Well, tell us, Kahan. In due time. In due time. Not tonight, but in due time. So counting to Pentecost. In Leviticus 23, verses 15 to 16, we read, "And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even until the morrow after the Sabbath, the 7th Sabbath, shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering unto Yahweh." Leviticus 23:15 has told us to count from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the very day you caused to enter in the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 complete Sabbaths were to be counted. The King James Version has rendered this 7 Sabbaths. However, the Pentateuch and Haftarahs by Hertz, Sonsino Press, London, page 521, shows this should have been translated 7 weeks. Okay, 7 weeks. "And ye shall count," the paragraph dealing with the Feast of Weeks has no introductory formula. Yahweh spoken to Moshe, such as we find in connection with the other festivals, because it was conceived as the complement of Passover and not something independent of it. Its name in Talmudic literature is not, Shavuos, but almost invariably that Hebrew word there. The concluding festival to Passover. We count the days that pass since the preceding festival, just as one who expects his most intimate friend on a certain day counts the days and even the hours. This is the reason why we count the days that pass since the offering of the Omer, between the anniversary of our departure from Egypt and the anniversary of the law given. Okay? The latter was the aim and the object of the exodus from Egypt. Maimonides. Okay, so anyway, in other words, the deliverance from bondage was not an end in itself. It was the prelude to Sinai. Liberty without law is a doubtful boon. What is that? Boon, whether to men or nation. Unto you, from this addition, the rabbis deduced that each Israelite had the duty of counting for himself. Hence, the counting of the days on the Omer, even after the Omer itself was no longer brought to the temple. The season between Passover and Shavuos, or Pentecost, which in Greek means the 50th day after the first day of Passover, is known as Sephirah, period of counting. It is a period or semi-mourning because repeatedly dire calamities befell the Jewish people all this time. Day of rest. This is a departure from the RV, which translates Sabbath, 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths. It is evident that here the Hebrew signifies week, hence the most common name for the festival, the Feast of Weeks. So the NIV in the Hebrew Interlinear Dictionary by Kohlenberger shows us the word-for-word translation of Leviticus 23:15, which I cannot really see. Let's see here. In bringing, let's see. Yeah, if you can see that, you can read that for yourself there. But 7 full weeks, that is 49 full days, must be counted, beginning with the morrow after the Sabbath, on which the wave sheaf was cut. Okay, top of page 228. Then on the 50th day of this count, the day of Pentecost, was kept as a feast to Yahweh. What was that? All right, so the temple and his ministry, the temple, its ministry and service by Edersheim, page 257, confirms this fact that the Sabbath, the count of Pentecost began from, was the first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 50th day of the first moon. The expression, the morrow after the Sabbath, has sometimes been misunderstood as implying that the presentation of the so-called first sheaf was to be always made on the day following the weekly Sabbath of the Passover, the morrow after the Sabbath. Let's see, Boethusians and the Sadducees in the time of Yeshua, and by the Karaite Jews and certain modern interpreters on a let's see here. Let's see, what is that? Rests on a misrepresentation of the word Sabbath, as in analogous allusions to other feasts in the same chapter. It means not the weekly Sabbath, but the day of the festival. The testimony of Josephus, of Philo, and of the Jewish traditions leaves no room to doubt that it is that in this instance we are to understand by the Sabbath the 15th of Nisan, on whatever day of the week it might fall. Okay, so the following calendar exactly illustrates the day upon which the first holy day Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 15th, and the day in which the Omer was waived, the 16th, and the year Yeshua Messiah was sacrificed. And you can see the like on that chart there, the days that's circled and squared, and you can see the time period in between those days there. Okay, so here at the bottom it says, right at the setting of the sun, ending the 14th day, but before the beginning of the 15th day, Yeshua Messiah was placed in his sepulcher, lying there for 3 full nights and 3 full days. Wednesday night, the 15th, Thursday, the 15th, Thursday night, the 16th, Friday, the 16th, Friday night, the 17th, Sabbath day, the 17th. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, there you have it. And at the top of the page it says, right after sunset on the 14th day, on the 15th day, the 15th, or Roman Thursday, the Omer sheaves were cut down. And so remember, I don't know if we're going to get into it, but remember, Yeshua was raised from the dead between the 2 evenings, right? Before the Sabbath had ended, he was he was gone. Remember, they went to look for him, but he was gone, right? Okay, exactly 3 days and 3 nights from the time, that he was nailed to the stake there. Exactly. Oh, excuse me, that he was in the grave. He was in the grave for those 3 days and 3 nights from when they removed him and put him in there. So 3 days and 3 nights. He died between the 2 evenings, as we see here, because you have to do that count backwards. So this is why you have to know, when the Sabbath day begins. You have to know these things so that you can count. Because it's not Good Friday, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not 3 days and 3 nights, man. We know this. Okay? So knowing the correct Sabbath, you can actually count backwards 3 days and 3 nights. And here's your proof right here. The feast started, exactly according to Yahweh's way here on this particular time. Let's see here. It says here, this Wednesday night between the 2 evenings, and then the feast started at that sunset. Okay, started at that sunset. So let's keep reading here at the top of page 220, 229. Hopefully I didn't make that confusing, because I'm actually having a difficult time seeing here this evening. I apologize again for that. But here where the second bullet point is, it says the high day Sabbath was the 14th day that year. The first holy day Sabbath for the Feast of Unleavened Bread fell on the 5th day, or Roman Thursday. The Omer offering was waived on the 16th day. The 16th day of the first moon, the day after the Sabbath, fell on the 16th day, Roman Friday that year. Look at the illustration of the calendar again. The 15th day was a Sabbath, even though it fell on the 5th day of the week, or Roman Thursday that year. We are to begin our count to Pentecost from the day after the high Sabbath, the high holy day Sabbath. Therefore, begin Yahweh's count to Pentecost that year on the 16th day. 16th day. 16th day, 16th. Day 1 of the Omer, the 16th day, Friday. 17th, day 2 of the Omer, the 7th day weekly Sabbath. 18th, day 3, 19th, day 4, and so on. When 7 Sabbaths or weeks are complete, you will have counted 49 days from the 16th day of the first moon, completely through the 3rd day of the 3rd moon, up to the very day, the 15th day of the week, Roman Thursday, on which the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread fell. And again, it sounds complicated when you're reading it like this, but it's very simple when you actually sit down and do it. And that chart's right here so that you can actually, practice on that if you need to. But it's a very simple process when you do it Yahweh's way. Very simple process. So again here, it says, let's see, when 7 Sabbaths or weeks are completed, you will have counted 49 days. Let's see, the 3rd moon. Next paragraph. Now the 50th day would be the very next day, the 6th day. I read that already also, huh? By using this count, you have faithfully followed Yahweh's ordinances concerning his count to Pentecost, making this feast his feast and not your own. In Leviticus 23 verses 15 and 16, it says, and you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths or weeks shall be completed. 49 days, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. 7th week shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering unto Yahweh. It was definitely on the 6th day of the week, on a Roman Friday and not on a Sunday, when the apostles and the disciples, numbering 120 people, were gathered in that room in one accord when the day of Pentecost was fully come. Okay, so only 120 people. Okay, does that number seem pretty low to you? Out of that whole nation, only 120 people were in unity that day. What does the wave offering represent? I kind of want to get into this, but I'm not. I'm going to save that for the great Kahan for next week, men. We only have about 1 minute left. So we're going to close there. The great Kahan will pick up next week on what does the wave offering represent. Okay, so be here and continue to add up the word of Yahweh in your mind. Continue to store this great information in your mind, because the more you know about these things, the greater your understanding is going to be, and the more joy you're going to have in Yahweh's house. Okay, man. Yahweh bless your understanding. We're stopping on page 230. What page is that in the new book? Anybody? What is it? 272? 272 in the new books. Page 230 in the old. Man.